Right. If we're ready to go, call the meeting into order. Do we need a motion for that?
Mr. Bartlesmeyer, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a quick voice vote to have you in place as acting chair.
Okay, we'll do that first. Yeah. So we'll go and do a voice vote.
Yes, we just need a motion, a second, and a voice vote to have Mr. Bartlesmeyer act as chair.
Mr. Cohn was first and Mrs. Clark was second.
So. Make a motion to have Mr. Bartlesmeyer chair this evening's meeting.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Feel free to proceed.
All right. Now we'll go ahead and call the meeting in order. Again, do we need a motion for that or is it just calling? Nope. All right. Well, we're good to go. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Do we have any?
We do need a roll call.
I do need to do.
We do need a roll call. Sorry. Correct. Go ahead.
All right. Member McCown Foster. Member Sineni, or sorry, Vice Chair. Secretary Loja.
Here.
Chair Ritter. Member Hafner.
Here.
Alternate Welker. Alternate Bartlesmeyer, an acting chair.
Here.
Alternate Marion.
Here.
Council Member Liaison Clark.
Here.
And our Commission Liaison Cohn.
Here.
All right, we have quorum.
All right. So now we'll move on down to the approval of the minutes. Do we have any comments, amendments for the meeting last week? Ms. Clark?
Yeah, just a comment, and you can change this if you want. If you don't, it's not that big of a deal. But under the color temperature, it is designated with a lowercase k. And although I've seen that in some just basic layperson documentation, the actual professional way to represent Kelvin is with a capital K, with no degree sign, but with a capital K. That's all.
All right. I am perfectly fine with that amendment. If no other amendments or comments, can I get a motion to approve the minutes with the new amendment?
I'll make the motion.
All right. Do we have a second? All right. Ms. Hafner. So we just need a roll call vote or just a voice
vote would be sufficient.
All right. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? All right. Move on down. Review. Is there any public comments section, or we just move on down to the agenda?
It doesn't look like there are any. Is anyone from the public in the attendees? It looks like it's just applicants.
All right, and we'll move on down to review of the agenda. We have one item from old business. It is the third review of the architectural drawings and related material of the 8 proposed awnings over exterior doors to a building located in the city's town center upon the property located at 17014 New College Avenue.
As you're aware, this has been before the board on 2 other occasions. At the last meeting, there were a few technical questions that we didn't have immediate answers for. We sent out a document in the packet that address the concerns pertaining to this. Essentially, in summary, the side panels, there's actually a photograph of the side panels in the document. Regarding the questions regarding to the business signs, as far as the area of the message not exceeding 5% or not being made of canvas or plastic, or that it shall be made of canvas and not plastic. Those were not exactly applicable because it's not a business sign, it's just an address sign. And then there was a question regarding the flame retardant material. And that question would be better addressed by the applicant. The city currently does not have any regulations that regarding the flame retardant that's used in the material. We do have the applicant here. We'd be happy to let him in. If you have any further questions, myself, Robin, or the applicant would be happy to address them.
Ms. Clark, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So I guess I'm a little confused, and that I thank you so much, Melanie. You went to a lot of work to get all these answers, but I have a question about the substrate still, and I sent you that. I'm wondering if we need to send this back to, I don't know who we sent it to, Mr. Cross, maybe you can help me with that, but to review the ordinance so that it's more clear, because I don't understand why a sign, an awning, that it matters if there's numbers or a message in writing on there as to what the substrate is. So the awning, what it's made out of itself, maybe it needs a little bit more clarification in the code that says that's only for, I don't know why it would only be for something that's a business sign, but I don't know, it just seems like the wording is, it's like Melanie pointed out that it's for the business sign, but why would that be different than having numbers on the sign, on the awning?
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
As far as that's concerned, I would agree that there is an inconsistency in that section, and I don't know if it's there for a reason or not, or if it was there for a reason when the regulations were written. Either way, what it boils down to is that the city can't enforce regulations that we don't currently have, and so even if we revise the regulations moving forward, like we could do that, but we can't retroact regulations. And this application was submitted prior to that regulation existing. And so it wouldn't necessarily be applicable to this application. As far as the substrate, I feel that we probably could and should look into revising the regulations, but not necessarily before this application is completed.
And if I may respond, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, it just, that's exactly what I was referring to. I understand that from here forward for this project, but I'm just talking about, since this came up, you know, I'm all about if we need to do things right the first time, but if we find something wrong, we need to address it right away. So who would we send that to? Which group do we send it to? I don't know, planning and zoning?
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, that's something that our department would be happy to look into and make more consistent in the language. I would also note that variations to the guidelines may be granted by the Architectural Review Board, where the variation satisfies the intent and objectives of the guidelines. And there's also that section that would also pertain, like this could apply to this particular case.
I think one thing that probably needs to take into account, and that doesn't mean this can't be changed, but I know one of the issues you can possibly run into here is that the fire department requires lettering to be a specific size. So for their aspect, a 5%, I can easily see, especially in this situation where we're exceeding 5% easily just because we have to meet their regulations. So, and that could be a reason why this is not pertaining to every single situation when it comes to lettering. So. With that, does anyone have any questions for the applicant directly based on the new material? If not, I think we should probably move to, well, I guess, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the submittal?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I think Miss Foster had her hand up
Second that
first,
for you.
so,
I would second that for you.
okay, we'll do it that way. That'll work.
Chair, if I may, there were two options presented to you.
Yes, I was just actually gonna go flip through that. I was wondering about that. I think, if I remember correctly, one option had the address on it and with the suite number, and one had just a suite number. If I remember our discussion from last month correctly, we decided that probably just the suite was probably what was needed, not the total address. So does everyone else agree with that? And is that the direction we'd like to take the motion? Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chair, members of the board, if you recall, just the suite number was also based on moving the address, the actual address to the building, to the front of the building, which the applicant said that he would be more than willing to do. So just for clarification on that one.
All right, yeah, so to clarify, we are approving the awnings with just the suite numbers with the stipulation that the main building address numbers will be relocated to the front of the building. As long as we're still good with that for the motions, we can go ahead and take our voice vote. So,
Mr. Chair,
sorry,
Mr. Chair,
go ahead. Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but you may want to restate that motion to include, because I don't think the motion on the floor necessarily covers everything that you all just discussed. So you might want to check that motion.
Okay. So can we get a new motion to approve as submitted with the option for just the suite numbers with the stipulation that the main building address will be relocated to the front of the building?
I'll make that motion.
I will second that.
All right. All right. With that, we'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Good. That was. All right, with that, we will move on down to new business. First one on here is initial review of renderings and related materials for the replacement of existing monument sign located at Fixed Supply, which is based off of Etherton Road. Sorry, go ahead with an explanation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so this evening we are in northernmost Wildwood at 501 North Etherton Road at Fixed Supply. They are replacing their current monument sign, and in order to do so, they are requesting variances from the Board of Adjustment, meeting next Thursday on the 17th. The variances they are requesting is to the front yard setback. They're requesting 25 feet in lieu of the required 50 feet. They are also requesting a variance to the width, 11 feet in lieu of the required 10 feet. And finally, a variance to the height. They're looking for 7.5 feet in lieu of the required 6 feet. The reason this case is before the Architectural Review Board this evening is due to our Chapter 415, 400 Sign Regulations General, which appoints you to the advisory capacity in this regard. You may provide your comments, suggestions, and recommendations this evening, and the department will summarize that into a memo and provide that to the Board of Adjustment for their consideration. And with that, I do not see our applicant representative here this evening. So the board may do with that as you will. But thank you, and we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I guess I have one quick question, and I don't know if you guys will be able to answer it because I don't know if this is discussed. Did they provide a reason why they are trying to go exceeding the sign limits?
Yes, if you've been up in that area, the speed limit is 45 miles per hour. There's large open space, and very quickly you can zoom right by their location is what they said. So this will just make it a little bit more visible to drivers as they pass by.
All right. Looking at the design of it, I don't know if I'm 100% behind that explanation for exceeding the height and width regulations, considering the actual marketable sign itself is not the entire size of it. There is a portion that sticks above, which in theory could be cut back. Especially when we're talking 1.5 feet compared to 6 feet. I understand that reasoning, but at the same time, there's quite a bit of this sign that is not actual their marketing sign. So I feel that could be cut back. Does anyone else have any other opinions? Ms. Foster, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you on the height of the sign. They're not here to comment, but looking at the two sides of the sign, one significantly higher than the other, that has nothing to do with visibility. That's an aesthetic decision on their part, whether we like the aesthetic or not. It's an aesthetic decision. So I'm not sure that I go with the idea that it's all for visibility. If it's for visibility, then the whole sign is the marketing sign as big as we can get. I definitely understand the speed limit component of it. But I agree with you, Mr. Chair, on everything that you said.
Sorry about that. All right, a lot of hands. Mrs. Clark, I think I saw yours first. Go ahead.
I agree with you also. In addition, in that area, it's quite a long stretch of open area. So I think you could see the sign quite a distance as you're driving by there. Whether you were going 45 or 35, I don't think it's going to matter that much. So I would not be quick to approve going forward with a larger sign just because of that reason. If there's another reason, I would like to hear it, but just for that reason, maybe not.
Yes. Mrs. Hefner, I think I saw your hand up.
I mean, I do think it's aesthetically pleasing. I really do. I think it looks nice. But yeah, could they take off the one side and just make them both the same? How tall is it then?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I don't think it's an offensive. Like I think they've done a good job with the brick and the making it look really good.
Yes. Mr. Cohen, I think I saw your hand up.
Yes, I just was, my question was, is the sign within the sign regulation dimensions, or did this need to go to the Board of Adjustment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I may. I
Yes,
can.
yes, sorry, go ahead.
This is going to the Board of Adjustment for the reasons that we're discussing here tonight. It's going for variances to the height, to the width, and then also to the setback.
So to speak of the setback, at least, I guess we haven't dug into that. I don't seem to have much of an issue with the setback. It seems to be that they are trying to place it similar to where their previous sign was located. Yes, there's no measurements, but at least based off their arrows, it's very similar in size or location. Does anyone else have any opinion on the actual location of the sign? Mrs. Clark, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I would just have have we looked at the site as they're coming out of that driveway? I think that's their driveway. Does it block any oncoming traffic on North Atherton Road?
I don't believe it should. I believe they're asking for a variance to 25 feet, correct? So at 25 feet from the road, that should not be in eyesight of anything, any cars coming down there. Especially there's no turns in that road, so so it shouldn't block any visual lines for cars. Sorry, Mr. Cross, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to point out to the board, and most of you may already be aware of this, but just something that you may want to consider. There is a very, very large development that is being planned on North Atherton Road on the west side at the intersection of Centaur and North Atherton. That's a $235 million project that the city is engaged in talks with. That is St. Louis County Road, and there are discussions on with them. It is possible, and just something to consider. It's very possible, given the size of that development and the types of trucks that will be coming out of that development, the speed limit along that stretch could potentially be lowered from the current 45 to something less, because there's going to be a lot of 18-wheelers. That's a zoned industrial down there, and it will be a 9-building when completed industrial park, assuming this project gets to completion. So there's a chance that speed limit might be lowered to, say, 40 or something. It's not within the realm of the city of Wildwood, but the county is also talking about the whole traffic study in that area. Just something to consider.
With that, would there possibly be, or would there be a possibility that they widen that road like they had done with the section north of there?
That is entirely up to the county in terms of what they want to do, but they will be doing a traffic study basically from Centaur through North Atherton all the way up to Highway 40, because that would be the direction that the trucks would be going. They obviously can't go south, but they'll build a whole traffic study, which potentially could include widening that or doing something to accommodate that increased volume of traffic.
Yeah, I know that road widens 100 feet north of this property, so I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. All right, does anyone have any other comments? It sounds like the group is in agreement on not recommending the size to be altered above was required, but what is everyone's opinion on location. It doesn't, I don't know if we're in agreement with anything on there for a motion. Sorry, yes, Ms. Rapto.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, you are also welcome to table this, given that the applicant isn't here to answer any of the questions that you have or have the discussion of, you know, possibly changing the size of the sign and such.
Okay.
If that's something you'd feel more comfortable with. Thank you.
Mrs. Clark, go ahead.
May I interject real
Oh,
fast?
sorry, yes, yes.
The applicant is now here with us, I see.
Okay.
Thank you. I was just going to make a move that we postpone, but now that the applicant's here.
Mr. Cohen, yes.
If this is going to go to the Board of Adjustment, how does our vote affect it if we're saying we don't agree with the size of the sign? Could they not just overrule that at the Board of Adjustment?
I would agree so, because we're not making any vote, we're making a recommendation.
Okay.
So yes, they have the ability to ignore our recommendation.
That is correct. We will summarize the discussion that we had here this evening and present it to them. And then they'll have a chance to consider it, but ultimately it'll be their decision.
Mrs. Clark, go ahead.
Well, I would just ask that the representative give us some, if he's got any other explanation now about why he wants this variance, why he wants the location variance as well as the size variance.
Sorry, I just want to make sure you guys can hear me. I've been having issues with my microphone since I came on.
Yes, we can hear
Okay,
you.
so thank you. First of all, I am so incredibly sorry that I am late. I could have swore it said 7 and I've been having issues getting my computer set up. So I'm so incredibly sorry that I was late to this. In terms of the signage that we're proposing, so initially it's the customer's main concern is the lack of visibility of their current size sign from the roadway. With it being the speed limit that it is, he has mentioned that he's had a tendency of people passing by and not realizing the location of his building without having any building signage that he has. And having a larger monument that will stand out is going to help aid in his customers and anybody else who's trying to get to his facility be able to properly identify it. In terms of the location of the sign, that was something that we had already had, we personally, the customer had approved prior. I believe it was sometime last year. We were actually just in the works of trying to get that figured out with the customer, but he had something prior, his current sign or a smaller general sign already approved for the location that we're currently proposing at. So it's already approved for the physical location, but for a smaller identification sign, we're just trying to get the larger identification sign approved for the location that, again, has already been approved.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Skinner, for that explanation. Ms. Clark, do you have a question?
I do. When exactly was that approved? So we can look back at the approval.
Yeah, I'm actually, as I said, I'm trying to get that figured out with the customer. He had told me once he had got the updates from the meetings, for the meetings, that they had happened prior to them ever working with us in terms of the signage. It was something that he handled himself. I'm still trying to get clarifying dates from him. I still have yet to get those, but we are working on getting those. But as far as he is concerned, he has had those approved prior.
Mrs. Clark, go ahead.
Mr. Ripperto or Mr. Cross, do we know about some approval that's been given on that location?
Ms. Rapto, go ahead.
Ms. Clark, this is the first that I've heard of it. We'd be happy to look into it and include that information in the packet at the next meeting if you would like.
Okay.
Ms.
Then
Clark,
I would, again, I would postpone, I would move that we postpone till the next meeting, till we have clarification if this was approved, this location, and if it's been within the time frame of the approval standing, so that we know what we're voting on.
well, we won't actually be voting on anything. We'll be making a recommendation. So we won't be approving anything in this meeting. Ms. Rapto, go ahead.
If I may, to my knowledge, as far as a variance is concerned for the location of the sign, it would be dependent upon the sign. So therefore it would require new approval anyway. And so therefore, if it's a different sign, it would still be going through the same process. And so therefore we'd be happy to provide the information, and I'll look into whether or not that would still be standing, but to my knowledge, it would still have to go through the same process in order to change the sign itself.
Okay.
Then I would withdraw that motion.
All right. With that, Ms. Skinner, we did discuss this a little bit before you jumped on. I think that basically most of the comments were about the size, the fact that they are larger than the maximum sign size. What basically the comments that came up is that though the sign is nice looking, basically it appears to be that the height and width are based off aesthetic aspects, not entirely the actual sign itself, the actual marketable sign. So, you know, we're hesitant on approving or giving our recommendation on approval of the larger size based off the fact that really the only features that are causing it to be bigger than the recommendation are aesthetic feels of it, not the actual marketable sign. Does anyone else have any other comments? If not, Ms. Skinner, feel free to reply.
Oh, sorry. In terms of that, I know that the customer is, he has also voiced to me that in fact that aesthetically, it obviously has become larger because of the mason accents that he is wanting to add. In terms of adding on to more signage, that was something that we had also discussed in the case of that it was needed. It is something that he feels structurally, it's again, more aesthetically pleasing to be larger. Unfortunately, I cannot speak fully on the behalf of the customer as to what way he's going to, you know, sway his decision on going with a smaller sign or whatever it may be. But I know that aesthetically, based off of the look of his storefront and everything else, the mason was a big contender for him to keep it larger and bold. And I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of, you know, it not having anything to do merchant wise towards the actual customer themselves. So I understand that completely. He just was very adamant on the actual structure because to him and to what he believes his customer base is, it's going to be more aesthetically pleasing. It's going to be more eye-catching and so on.
Is there any comments based off of the response? All right. With that, does anyone have, I guess the question is, do we feel that our response has changed at all with that comment? It doesn't seem like that is. With a recommendation and not an actual vote, do we make a motion? still?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe we have taken a vote in past meetings
Okay.
for this type of review.
Okay.
So I will summarize the comments that I heard today, and it sounds like we landed on we're recommending against variances to the overall size of the sign, but that we are okay with the current location being proposed. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. If anyone else doesn't agree, go ahead and chime up now. Otherwise, I believe that's what we were proposing.
I will go ahead and draft a memo summarizing this feedback, and I'll make sure to send it out to the board before our meeting next week.
All right. All right. Thank you, Ms. Skinner.
Thank you.
All right. With that, we'll move on to the next item, which is, right sheet, yes. The initial review of the architectural elevations of one proposed single-family detached dwelling to be placed on a 0.69 acre parcel of ground located on the southwest corner of Manchester Road, East Avenue. Ms. Kiefer, Ms. Repto, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I will give a brief overview. As stated, the application is for a proposed single-family home. It's on the lots at 1704 and 1706 Manchester at the intersection of Manchester and East Avenue. The applicant will have to do a boundary adjustment to combine these lots to one in order to place the single-family home. It's in the non-urban residential district, the neighborhood edge district of the town center regulating plan. Additionally, the applicant, Wayland Custom Homes, has also submitted a petition to the city requesting a change in zoning of this property from non-urban, the residence district, to the R3. That went before the Planning and Zoning Commission on the 7th for a public hearing. The department doesn't yet have comments on this. I would like to note before turning this over to the applicant for their presentation that the town center design standards in the in this zoning district, in the neighborhood edge zoning district, require that at least 60% of the front facade of each house must be placed along a uniform build-to setback line that applies to the full block frontage. This build-to setback line should be determined at the time that the street and block is approved. As you can see in the plans, the building setback line is 20 feet and the home is shown to be 58.37 feet from Manchester Road and 30 feet from East Avenue. I would also note that the variations to these guidelines may be granted by the Architecture Review Board where the variation satisfies the intent and objectives of these guidelines. I would turn this over to the applicant to go into more detail as to the placement of the home. And that concludes my overview. If anyone has any questions after the presentation or now, Ms. Keefe and I are both here to answer them. Otherwise, I would turn it over to the applicant. We can let him in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whalen, if you would like to present your building, please.
Sorry, I'm technologically challenged, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you, Ms. Ribito, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Mike Whalen. I am the president and owner of Whalen Custom Homes. I have been before this board 20 times in the last 4 or 5 years. I built 12 homes in Stone Mill subdivision, which were all individually approved by your board, different members at the time. I built 5 homes on Center Avenue, and I built 3 homes in Bordeaux Estates Plat 2. I don't know if you all are familiar with this site or you remember the history of it, but initially when we were building Stone Mill, there was a very small, poorly conditioned house on a 50-foot wide lot facing Manchester Road. There's a lot of garbage and debris in the yard, and the tenants weren't keeping up with the maintenance and so on and so forth. We purchased the property, had it demolished because we wanted to clean up the area for our new subdivisions, Stone Mill and Old Town Park, as well as Bordeaux Estates Plat 3. So I've owned this property for quite some time. And then just for the record, the 3 lots have been consolidated. The plat was approved and has been recorded. So now it is actually one plat, or one parcel with one parcel number. That's the Department of Planning has all the documentation on that. I just talked to Mr. Vonich about it last night. With respect to the placement of the structure on the lot, in the neighborhood edge district, we've been given a lot of grace in the past. It's not as we're afforded more latitude to try to, make sure that the spirit of the town center requirements are included in the development, or the materials, the architectural features, as well as the placement of the house on the lot. In this case, this house is placed very strategically for a number of reasons. And if you check with Mr. Vonich, he and I we've talked about this for years. The way this house is designed, and this is 99.9% going to be my personal residence. The mail trucks that drive through, that mail trucks have been driving over this lot as long as I've owned it, which has been 5 years or so. And we actually recorded an easement, an expanded driveway easement, and located the driveway of this structure in the area where their larger trucks would encroach onto the property. So, number one, the structure's somewhat centered on the property. It'll be very balanced looking from the road. The garage is facing towards the commercial property across the street to create a nice backyard, area. So sort of the garage is a buffer for the residents, for the backyard, between the commercial across the way and the residential behind us. So we didn't want to place the lot at the 20-foot building line. And in fact, I don't think any of my houses, or 17 of my 20 houses that I built in neighborhood edge are built right up to the front building line. We've taken into consideration the structures next to them, how the property would look on the lot, overall balance of the site and the aesthetic of the house. So I would ask for some latitude and grace on that, given the encroachment that constantly happens with the mail trucks coming in and out. They will be driving over this driveway all the time. And if you go out and look at the property, you will see ruts in the earth where those mail trucks are constantly hitting. Our engineer placed this house for that. And again, Old Manchester is a pretty busy road, so we wouldn't want the structure too close to the busy road anyway, for safety reasons. So as far as the placement of the house on the lot, it actually conforms to the requirements of the non-urban zoning. The request to have it rezoned to R3 was just a measure to clean up the zoning map. So that was something Mr. Vonich and I talked about because everything, Old Town Park, everything adjacent to it has, either been, a planned development or has a straight zoning requirement. So since the adjacent properties are R3, this makes sense to change this from non-urban to R3, but the house works under, it fits within the setback lines required under the non-urban zoning. So whether or not it's approved for the rezoning, this placement complies. So as far as the placement of the structure, I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. But it is very strategic, and it's something I've talked about with the Department of Planning several times, and we, have placed the house accordingly. So I'd be happy to address any concerns about that or any other concerns for that matter.
Sorry about that. It's muted. I don't know if anyone raised their hands. For a second there, I couldn't see everyone. So if everyone, all right, Mrs. Clark, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got so many questions tonight, but is this something that the department is recommending, that we, that this is a good idea?
Well, they recommended it. I mean, we discussed, Joe and I worked out, we actually recorded an easement on the property for the, to allow for the encroachment of the, to allow for the mail trucks to get further into the driveway so that they're not breaking the law or trespassing, because it's just too tight of a radius for them to be able to make a safe turn. So, in terms of a formal recommendation, no, but Joe Bunich and I literally sat down and measured it out and established the easement together. So I can tell you without any equivocation, he would say that he is in support of where that driveway is. He personally, as far as the department or this coming up in planning and zoning, it wasn't even, no one said a word about it.
Mrs. Rapto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as a department recommendation is concerned, this isn't exactly something the department would make a recommendation on. This is based up to the Architectural Review Board to approve or not approve, or determine if the variation from the setback lines meets the intent and the objectives of the town center guidelines. This is something for the Architectural Review Board to determine. Otherwise, the plans for the house meet all of the city's regulations to date, and or will before zoning authorization is issued. Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions? I mean, I have some, but before I go, I want to see if anyone else did. As for location, I understand the want to have the house located farther off Manchester Road than 20 feet. Like you said, it is a busy road, and with this being a residence opposed to a business, I can understand that. If I'm looking at the plot plan correctly, we don't really have any other points of reference. It looks like the building to the west faces their other street, not Manchester Road. Is that correct?
Yes, and I built that structure, and the front of this house is pretty much in line with it might be maybe 8 to 10 feet behind Mr. Stone's residence. He's one of our employees and a dear friend of mine. So yes, so we, that went into the equation as well. But basically that front corner of bedroom 3 is maybe 8 to 10 feet behind the corner of his garage. And he has a rear entry garage as well.
Okay.
So it's pretty much in balance. It's also pretty much in balance with the strip center across the street. So the aerial photo will make sense when you see the aerial photo.
Okay. What about buildings on East Avenue? Are they also set off, or are they set on the 20-foot building line?
The commercial, Mr. Chair?
No, the houses, as you go down, yes.
Yeah, so, okay. Bordeaux, Plat 2, and the original Bordeaux, that is not neighborhood edge. That is strict, town center guidelines. So those guidelines have much less flexibility and much less latitude than the neighborhood edge guidelines do as far as the architectural review is concerned. You'll note that all of the Bordeaux Estates, it's unbelievable. It was the only to which I'm aware neighborhood that actually requested to have front entry garages in town center. And then there was a big to-do and all kinds of public consternation. So there are actually provisions written into the architectural guidelines to allow for those houses, so that they have to have protruding garages or protruding front porches. I think a minimum of 7.5 feet that have, the face of the garage can't stay. So it's a totally different requirement. So yes, they are butted up to their front porches. You'll notice they all stick out 7.5 feet from the face of the garage, and they're 20% of, at least the front porches are at least 20% of the width of the house. The front face of that garage is touching the front building line of those lots. And I believe they are 20 feet off the back of the right of way as well. But that's a different zoning classification than what we're seeking and what we have on Center Avenue, and then what we have in Old Town Park, and what we're requesting on Wesley Park, which is our new development. So none of those houses were held to that strict standard, Mr. Chair. In fact, we didn't even discuss, all 20 of my submissions were approved first time through the ARB. And we never discussed lot location one time, or house placement one time through ARB. It was always done by the Department of Planning. And there were several times when we would come in for our zoning authorizations after we had already received architectural review and approval, where the department would ask us to revise, the placement of a house. Can you move it back? Can you move it forward? Can you change the garage? Can you extend? Can you shorten the turnaround pad? Can you extend the driveway? There was all kinds of discussions on those 20 homes, but it was mostly with the Department of Planning. It was never with ARB. ARB, we really focused on, are we meeting the architectural guidelines? I can assure you the department is not shy about telling me where they want the house placed on the lot. When we started Stone Mill in 2017, you were allowed to pour your concrete flat work all the way up to the property line on a side entry garage without without question or stipulation or restriction. And that law or that ordinance was modified in 2017 to give the Department of Planning discretion over driveways and taking impervious surface all the way to the property line. So I've honestly never even had this conversation with the ARB before, but I would ask that you know, that you grant us the latitude and grace on this one, because I think it's going to center the house on the lot. It's going to be safer. It deals with the traffic problem of the, you know, the post office, and I just think it makes sense. So it lines up with the adjacent properties, and it just closes that corner off really nicely. So any other questions, I'd be happy to try to address them.
All right. Mr. Cross, you had your hand up.
I did, Mr. Chair, but I'll withhold my comment. Thank you.
Okay. With that, I do have some questions pertaining to elevations. Actually, quite frankly, they're more likely just clarifications. No, somewhat clarifications. So to start, so obviously you have the drawn elevations, but you also have color renderings.
Yes, sir.
I did notice one, there is a difference between them. The actual elevations line drawings shows in the gables number 10, it calls about an accent, a trim accent. But when we go to the color renderings, instead of the accent, it shows vents and windows. Is there clarification on which one is actually being presented?
So, yes, sir. So we have limitations in our software. Our software has limitations. So the software that provides the one-dimensional limitation or the one-dimensional elevations is different than the software that provides the three-dimensional. So the three-dimensional renderings is the most accurate rendering that we can provide, with one exception, and it's the garage door. So these three-dimensional drawings have a catalog of products in them. You'll note that one of the requirements in the neighborhood edge architectural standards is a carriage style garage door, which is what we're actually proposing. But the catalog of garage doors to choose from with the software does not have that garage door. So it's just a glitch in the software, and there's nothing I can do about that. So the three-dimensional drawing is the closest one to the actual, with the exception of the garage doors that we can present.
So what you're saying is that on the front elevation, it will not be the accents. It will instead be the window and louvered vents.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That also clarified one of my other questions, which was the garage door. You clarified that and saying that it is the carriage style.
Yes, sir. It's if you look at the material list, it actually shows the specific garage door, the Delden Northampton with Thames glass. And you'll note that the grill pattern in the glass on the garage door in the material section is the same grill pattern that's proposed in the windows. So it's a really nice look, and that we have that garage door on several houses over in those neighborhoods.
My last question deals with the James Hardy board and bat.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you can clarify exactly what that I don't know if anyone else having issues. Clarify exactly what that material is going to be, because James Hardy doesn't technically make a board and bat. They make vertical siding, or they make stucco boards with that you can apply the trim to.
Well,
So I
it's,
wanted to clarify exactly.
yeah, so they do make it. It's called Hardy Panel. And they're 4x8 sheets of James Hardy fiber cement siding. And whenever the siding intersects, you have a joint, and then so the 4x8 sheet is the board, and the piece of trim that covers the buttress or the connection point or the joint, whatever you want to call it, is called a batten board. So it is commonly referred to as board and batten siding. That's just an architectural term for that style of siding. If you go to the James Hardy catalog, they will call it James Hardy panels. So it's just, 4x8 sheets with trim boards covering up the buttresses.
Okay. So with that, what is the spacing going to be between the battens then?
On the front, I think it's 2 feet. So it's cutting those 4x8s in half.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, again, another kind of glitch in the software. Let me just make sure this is correct. It's not 100% to scale on the either the 3D renderings or the one-dimensional renderings as far as the trim boards. They look, it's it's a button you push. You have a catalog for selecting a catalog with the software for collecting. You click on board and batten, and that's what pops up. So it's as close of a representation as I'm able to provide in a colored rendering. The one-dimensional blueprints actually demonstrated a little clearer, I think, than the three-dimensional.
Mr. Cohen, you have a question?
Yes, what material is the batten board made out of? Is it also Hardy board, cement board?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's fiber cement. It's the exact same material, same thickness, same everything. It's a great product, and that's required in town center.
Were there any other questions? With regard to the trim elements on the front elevation we're just talking about earlier, and at least and that you said they were removed and replaced with the louver vents in the window. As it's shown right now, you have that same trim element on the left elevation. Is that staying on that left elevation?
Yes, and again, Mr. Chair, it's kind of a conflict. So if you're looking at the left elevation on the actual blueprint, you'll see, casing around the windows and, an architrave over the top of the windows. So we will trim out the windows on the side. It's really hard to get those details pinned down on the software. So the rendering is not meant to be it's meant to be a representation just to demonstrate the colors. But yes, you can see, if you look really closely, you can see it, the software does its best to represent them. But it's very difficult to see the change. So.
My comment was in regard to the, not just the trim around the windows, but the trim element at the gable peak.
Oh, that pediment? Yeah, I hate
Yeah,
that.
pediment.
That's going to be nowhere. Yeah, I hate
All
that.
right.
That's a place for birds to build nests, and it's an absolute nightmare. So that, I'm sorry. I wish I would have caught that.
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Clark.
Just as a last question for me, and this doesn't have anything to do with the looks of or the architecture of this building, but I can't tell on this line drawing how many trees that have to come out for this residence. It looks like you've got some, but I can't see it on my
All of them. There are, and I talked to Mr. Bunich about it. There are every tree that's on that property is an invasive species. There's no grand trees. There's nothing worth saving. It's all honeysuckle and there's no healthy, nice trees that are coming out. I mean, everything there is trash. And Mr. Vunich agreed with me on that when we talked about it. In fact, I've been asking if I can remove them. We've had a real problem over the past few years with people just people parking on this lot without permission, people dumping trash on this lot without permission. And I asked Mr. Vunich, since none of those were considered grand trees, if I could just go ahead and take them down. And he said, you're so close to, it's not worth the effort at this point in time, but there's nothing worthwhile saving there. And I'd invite you to go take a look at it. It's just brush, scrub, and some gnarly cedars that are there. The nice trees that are in the background are on the neighboring properties that you see from the photos. If you look at the site plan, it does call out the trees, but all of that entire line. In fact, several of those trees that were actually on that site were removed with the construction of, with approval and the construction of the adjacent property. Yeah, you got to really zoom in. You can see that tree line, and it actually shows the diameter of the trunks through that and the apron. Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's so faint. You can barely see it, but they're 6-inch, cedars and 4-inch cedars. And, I don't think there's a tree in there bigger than 12 or 18 inches, and they're all invasive species. We'll be doing some landscaping, obviously. We want to, create a little bit of a landscaping buffer in the front yard, obviously on the side yard, and maybe a little bit in the back, not a whole lot.
Are there any other questions? No. as I'm sitting here right now, I'm finding it difficult to make a motion to approve this, considering we don't really have an elevation that shows exactly what's being built. I understand the limitations you have with the 3D rendering. I completely understand that, and I understand that for the most part that is there for the aesthetics of the feel. My issue just is that, you know, we have a front elevation that doesn't show windows that are supposed to be in there and louvers. We have side elevations that show elements that aren't actually going to be there. So it's very difficult for me to see how we can approve when we're entirely not sure exactly what we're getting. I leave it up to the rest of the board members to voice their opinions on that as well. Sorry,
Mr.
Ms. Hafner, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You know, just knowing, I'm a realtor in the area, and just knowing his homes and knowing what he's done previously, in the area, they've all been, very aesthetically pleasing homes. That's just my take.
Mr. Cohen, go ahead.
I agree with you. How can we approve of something if we haven't been shown?
Yeah, that, I don't doubt Mr. Whalen's ability to build homes. Yes, I've seen many of his houses. They're nice. It just, I don't know if we physically have anything here to approve at the moment. Mr. Foster or Mrs. Foster, sorry.
No problem at all. Just a question, the plant material that you have on site, were you referring to those being Eastern red cedars when you referred to the trees that are on site as cedars?
They are unhealthy cedars. I don't know the exact species, but we had to have, when we did, forgive me, I'm sorry, Old Town Park, we had our arborist out there, and he said there was nothing worth keeping in that patch of property. So yeah, at one point in time, we were considering making 2 lots facing East Avenue. So I don't know what species of cedar it is, but he said those were all invasive species in there.
Okay, the only reason I question that is just that Eastern red cedars is typically what we find in this area. It is an unattractive tree by all means. It is not a specimen tree, but it is a Missouri native. So I don't know if the city has a policy on replacing native plants, if they are in fact removed, if that is what it is. Cedar is a general term, obviously not a botanical term, so it's hard to say, but just my 2 cents there on that.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Whalen,
Okay.
go ahead.
I certainly appreciate your concern. So I guess there are finite details and finite differences between the renderings in the plans. But I would say no matter which picture, it's remarkably expensive to have your architectural plans change for a decorative detail like a pediment and so on and so forth. And very often in construction, we redline these changes. So, and mark the plan up and remove. It's also remarkably expensive to create these colored renderings. But I don't think there's anything in either the blueprints, the one-dimensional renderings or the three-dimensional renderings that are not in full compliance with the architectural guidelines that are established for the area. So I would just, rather than kick this can down the road, I would appreciate a motion to, if there's an element that you're concerned about, there's really only 2 or 3 things that that are not perfectly in sync. And I would really appreciate a recommendation with modifications. And that is exactly the protocol that we followed on the other 20 houses that I've taken before the Architectural Review Board, rather than make me have to go back and spend thousands of dollars modifying drawings just to deal with some very minute details that are inconsequential to the overall look of the project. So I'll throw that out there, and I'd appreciate it if you guys would consider that.
Mrs. Clark, I believe I saw your hand up.
Yeah, most of my questions were answered with the others, but although I would like to just, I know that you have great product that you put out there, Mr. Whalen, but I have to agree with Mr. Myers that this, I don't know architecture like these architects on this, in this group. But I do look at it and I'm like, well, what am I not seeing? What is it that I would like to see, maybe you have something that would show us the exact thing that's coming through. But I also would like to get over there, and I apologize, I had this agenda and I didn't get over and take a look, but if I'm welcome to come over and walk the land, I would like to go over and see exactly what it is that is growing and where the impervious surfaces are going to be, what it's going to be covering up, because I don't know, that's my main focus is the environment.
Well, you're absolutely welcome to visit the property anytime and walk it anytime. I respectfully request a motion with conditions rather than deferring this. And if you make a recommendation with conditions, the board is going to make or the department is going to make sure that they happen. But it's a significant, what you're asking for is I have to conform with all of the Department of Planning's guidelines for tree removal, for everything. Our applications for zoning authorizations are remarkably thorough. In the past, when we present, this is the exact same software, this is the exact same format, this is the exact same submissions that I did for the other 20 houses. And there were minor discrepancies between the plans. But with all due respect, all of those conversations were based upon architecture and the appropriate elevations and the cohesive look, and does this fit in with the spirit of what we're looking for in the district, not with setback lines and vegetation issues and those things that are remarkably governed by planning and zoning, as well as Department of Public Works. So I'm respectfully requesting approval with conditions. And I would, if you see something, ma'am, that you have concern about, or a tree that you think needs to be saved or something, I am all ears. And I've been working with the city for a long time. I wouldn't be here tonight. I'm building this home for myself. I want to become part of the community. I live in Eureka. I build probably 10 houses a year in Wildwood, mostly on large non-urban lots. I'm a conservationist myself. We take a conservationist approach to all of our developments, and we have a reputation for doing that within the city. So, respectfully, I request this can does not get kicked down the road another month over what I consider to be minor minor discrepancies, I feel it would be appropriate to recommend an approval with conditions. And I can assure you that the the Department of Planning will listen to your conditions and not let me build something that is beyond that scope. So thank you.
Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Whalen, you're asking us to approve this evening with conditions. If you could, in possibly 25 words or less, tell us what conditions are you requesting? How is that worded? What are the conditions?
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. The conditions would be anything that are of concern to you. If, for instance, the removal of the pediments on the left elevation, that would be a condition. Anything that you see on these architectural renderings that are of concern, or that you feel are conflicts among the drawings, those would be the conditions. So anything that you see that you find offensive or you think doesn't comply with the architectural guidelines of the area, those would be the conditions I would ask that you guys state in your conditional approval. Mr. Chair, you mentioned a few things, but really, I mean, aside from the pediments and a cohesive, the replacement of, adding the gable vents and the decorative window and removing the pediments, I don't think those are the only conditions that I heard that were even spoken to. And whether we had those or we didn't have those, I think both of those drawings would comply with the requirements of the architectural requirements and guidelines of the area. So whether it's a gable vent or whether it's a window, does it really matter? Does it make any appreciable difference to you? I can tell you, we had in my previous experience with architectural review, if there was something that was troublesome for a member of the board, they just said, Mr. Whalen, would you mind extending this brick return an extra 2 feet? Or would you mind doing this? Or would you mind doing that? And I'd say no. And we would add that as a condition. So to me, the plan as presented is approvable. Everything complies. So if there's something that bothers you that you want me to change, I'm all ears. But these are just very minor details that in all reality, you wouldn't even see from the street. You drive by that house 1,000 times and you wouldn't notice the difference. So I would just ask that, I'm happy to remove the pediments. I'm happy to stipulate that we're going to do the decorative window and the gable vents in lieu of the trim that's shown in the blueprint. These are just aesthetic, minor. It would cost me more money to redraw this than it would to actually make the changes to the plan. So I'd ask for some grace in that respect.
Mrs. Foster, I believe I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Can you review for us specifically what we're to be approving here? What came before the board? Forest Chair, was it specifically the setbacks that we were addressing? Was it the zoning that we were addressing? Was it all of it? What specifically did we come here for tonight? We kind of went all over the place. I'd just love a review if that's okay.
Mrs. Rapito, go ahead.
Thank you. Members of the board, what you're voting on tonight is essentially the architectural review of this single family home. As far as the zoning and that's before the Planning and Zoning Commission and irrelevant to the architectural review. And honestly, the house meets the regulations in either zoning. So it's moot as far as the architectural review is concerned. As far as the location of the house within the setbacks, the architectural review has the right to vary from the guidelines, and so therefore that should be taken into account while reviewing the architectural review aspect of the home. And so if you did want to include clarifications on the plans with the discrepancies, you can approve the plans with the discrepancies clarified as conditions. You're welcome to do so. Does that clarify everything, or did I create more questions?
That's, Ms. Foster, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. Then I would say for me personally, I'm not opposed to approving with conditions that the other board members feel are important to them. I am respectful of the cost aspect of this. I know we have put similar conditions on some of the commercial projects that we've approved, but that's a much larger scale project, a much larger scale budget, not a single family home. And I think there is something to be said for that and pushing that back through to be respectful of the cost that some of these minor changes make. I know I incur those in my own work. So I would be open to approving with solid conditions if other members would. Thank you.
I am not opposed to approving with conditions. The issue I have is I'm not sure what those conditions are. Like I said, we don't seem to have a single drawing on this package that actually shows what the house is going to be. For starters, I'm like, we're talking about the pediments and the windows. The renderings show vertical siding throughout the house, where the actual plans show horizontal siding on the rear of the house. Which one will that be? Which one are we approving? You know, that's exactly like Mr. Cohn said. We don't know what we're approving. So, I can add stipulations, but what, without us knowing what everything is actually going to be, it's hard to approve anything. Mr. Whalen.
Mr. Chair, is there anything on any drawing that is offensive to you? Whether it's vertical siding or horizontal siding, the plan is to do the board and batten all the way around the house. That's the plan at this moment. But board and batten siding and horizontal siding are both accepted under the architectural guidelines. And I have mixed and matched those along with shake siding on every house that we've built over there. So whether it's board, if you would say, Mr. Whalen, I'd approve this based on the blueprint and no modifications, that's fine with me. If you said, Mr. Whalen, I would approve this with board and batten siding on the front and horizontal siding on the back, that's fine with me. I guess my question is, I just feel like these are all very inconsequential. These are texture and trim questions. These are, I'm sorry if I sound frustrated. I don't mean to be. It's been a very long day, and this is in no way, shape, or form directed towards you or meant to be disrespectful to the board. I feel, having presented, like I said, 20 individual houses, that what you have in front of you represents this house, the colors, the feel, the shape, the spacing, the style, the architectural features, regardless of which plan you look at. So I would just ask if there's anything that offends you or you think is not architecturally consistent, I'm all ears, and I would be happy to modify it as such. But the house is going to look the same whether I put a gable vent or I put a window. I hate the pediments. I don't plan on putting the pediments in. But this plan was drawn a long time ago. And when I started playing around with the elevations, the 3D drawings come afterwards. The pediments look terrible. I took them off the front. I didn't take them off the sides. That was just an oversight on my part. I apologize for that. But I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Chair, is it doesn't matter to me if it's horizontal siding or vertical siding on the sides and the back. I'll do whatever the board thinks looks better. It costs the same. It looks the same. It's almost indistinguishable from the street in these darker colors. So I guess I would just ask, what bothers you about this, or what do you think is inconsistent? Because overall, it's going to look generally the same, and that's what I've grown accustomed to, having dealt with the board. If the rules have changed, I understand. I'll do a better job next time of presenting. I just don't think it's that different. I think you can really get a sense of what the house looks like from what we presented. I've seen some stuff come before the board that's hand drawn and, with colored pencils, that's nowhere near this level of quality. And I've seen it get approved. So, I apologize. I'm sorry. I don't mean to waste your guys' time. I hate to see this kick down the road for another month over a few very, very minor details. So if something offends you, please just let me know. And I'm open to making that modification, sir.
Mr. Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As was pointed out earlier by Ms. Keefe, and I think Ms. Ripito may have echoed it. This board is not taking a vote tonight. There will be a report written by Ms. Keefe in terms of what your thoughts are. She's shaking her head no. So are you taking a vote?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Just for clarification, that was the last item on the agenda. The sign is for a report that goes to the Board of Adjustment. This is actually for architectural approval on this item.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah.
So thanks for the clarification. What I was going to suggest is, I don't think you all are going to come to any kind of agreement tonight. It does not seem. One option that you have is for the members of this board to submit. Well, you can either vote to approve or not to approve, but an option that you have is for each of the members of the board, if you have something that you are concerned about, be it windows or the direction of the board or anything else, submit that in writing, put it to Ms. Keefe. Okay, that then she can consolidate it and send it back to Mr. Whalen and ask to have the drawings redone, or they can be with the following conditions. But right now, that gives each of the members of this board time to think about what, and delve into it, put it in writing and submit it to Ms. Keefe for consolidation and say, these are the conditions, as opposed to trying to get them all out now, because we're kind of going around in circles here. Nothing's really being accomplished, but there is concern on the member of this board. So I'd say put it in writing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cross. Mr. Whalen, my issue is not with any certain feature. Like you said, no, I don't think there's any individual feature on these drawings that goes against what Wildwood allows. The issue is we don't know what we're approving. I mean, there is multiple variations between the renderings and the actual elevations. Our job is to approve these elevations.
And you think those are significant, Mr. Chair? You think it makes any architectural difference? Any of those discrepancies? Because that's a new standard for this board.
It's not a new standard. If previous boards do not withhold to that standard, that's on them. But these are not new standards.
I understand. Thank you.
My issue just is that it does not sound, I mean, like, what we approve is what is supposed to be built. If in the past you're going about and changing them in the field after the fact, well, that's not what's supposed to be happening.
No, no, I didn't say that. What I said quite clearly, first of all, this application costs thousands of dollars to put together, thousands of dollars. Okay. And this is my 21st time doing it. I've never been turned down, ever, not one time. This house is no different than any of the other houses, the same features. I know the guidelines, I know about the materials, I know about the returns, I know about everything that needs to be in these plans is on these plans. There are minor details. All, whether they're conflicting or not, I'm suggesting is irrelevant. So when you say you don't know what you're approving, you know what the materials are, you know what the house is going to look like, whether it has a gable vent or a window or a piece of trim is of no significance. And what I requested respectfully was that if there's something that bothers you about it, that is not congruent with the architectural guidelines of the area, then just tell me and make that comment. But I don't even know, does any of it bother you? Because you could approve, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm very frustrated. You know, I know this is a new group. I knew the rules with the last one, and it was quite clear, and I followed them to the letter. In fact, they told me that my presentations were the gold standard, and then I come here tonight and I present this, which is no different, and I hear that my presentation doesn't provide enough detail for you guys to come to a determination about what you're approving. This is exactly what the house is going to look like, with some very, very minor details that are not architecturally significant. And I go before architectural review boards in Ladue, in Clayton, in Webster Groves, in Town and Country, every single municipality you can think of. And I don't think, in all fairness, I don't think it's a fair statement for you to say you don't know what you're approving. You look at the three-dimensional drawing of this house, and that is the spirit of this house. If there's something you don't like, please let me know, and I would gladly acquiesce to that, to save myself a month and to save myself thousands of dollars of representing this in 30 days. Okay, that's my request. I respect any decision you make.
Mrs. Clark, you had your hand up.
Well, I'm trying to compose in my head a motion. I'd like to call the question, because I'm here and, you know, we're going back and forth and we're not going forward. This is the first time it's been before us that I've seen it. And I would move that because there's still questions going on back and forth, instead of approving with conditions, I would move that we postpone a month and come back with ask that you come back with a drawing, because Chair Bartelsmeyer is right. We don't know exactly what we're voting on, and I just think that we need to go on and get this, do something. And so I'm going to move that we postpone a month and ask that you come back with more precise drawings or elevations.
Do we have a second on the motion? Mr. Whalen, you have a comment?
All I want to say is, Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I have never been before an architectural review board that has spoken less about the architectural characteristics of a plan than this tonight. Okay, I'm one of the biggest builders in Wildwood, and you know, I would appreciate, that's fine, I respect, I get it, it's not getting approved tonight, but please, can somebody give me some clarification about what the rules are going to be going forward, so I know what to bring in? Because this is not fair. It's not fair. I know your guidelines, I know your standards. It's my 21st time that I have made a submittal, and it's actually personally offensive to me that this is turned down for the very minor details that are in dispute. So we haven't talked about architecture. We haven't talked about style. We've talked about placement of the property on the lot We've talked about trees. We've talked about, that's it. So to me, I don't even feel like I'm in an architectural review board meeting. I feel like it's well, let's just scrutinize this to the nth degree. If I was told that I had to have precise to the inch renderings, fine. I would have bought them the first time. They're $1,000 more than what I have here. Okay, now I got to go do it again. Spend thousands of dollars, and you don't even have any criticisms of the house. It makes no sense. It's not fair. So you guys vote however you want. Just tell me what the rules are. I'll bring it back next time. Tell me what you want, and that's what you'll get. That's what I do. That's what I've done in the past on every other house.
Sir, what we're asking for is consistency. What we have right now is we have renderings and elevations that are not consistent. So we do not know what we're voting on. You're the one that presents these. It is not up to us to determine what goes on these houses. You have presented it. We're asking why there's inconsistency. Mrs. Rapito, your hand up earlier.
I withdraw my comment.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Do we have a second on the motion to table this for next month? Do we have a second? Do we have another motion to go on the floor then if we don't have a second for the previous motion? Mr. Cohen?
I'll second the motion. Time to move on.
All right, with that, we'll do a voice vote. Do you have a, all in favor of the motion, say aye? Aye.
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 Any of, anyone not approving of the motion? Any abstention?
I'm abstaining.
Okay,
I am abstaining as well.
all right. With that, do we have any other items? No? All right. Our next meeting is March 10th, if needed. And sorry, I lost track of where I'm supposed to be on the checklist. Any closing remarks? Yes, Mr. Cross.
Mr. Chair, I would ask Ms. Ripito about the training session. You might want to point that out. Isn't that at the next meeting on March the 10th? That would start an hour earlier. Is that correct?
Yes, we had sent out an email about it previously, and that is our goal, is to move the training session to the next agenda at 5:30. The city attorney is available for that, so provided we can get enough members, then that is our intent. We will be sending out materials probably beforehand, just so that you have a chance to take a look at them, and hopefully we'll get all of our questions answered and yeah, get this process down a bit smoother. There are some other changes that I'm thinking about doing as well that I'd like to discuss at that point in time. That's all. Thank you. Oh, sorry, really quick.
go
I
ahead.
would also be happy to take in any comments that you have about inconsistencies or, you know, concerns regarding the Whalen home. And I'd be happy to pass them along to Mr. Whalen if you would like. Thank you.
I mean, I'll make one comment on it. It's just want to know what he's presenting. That's all. And, you know, that's it. You know, I had no problem with either one, but there's too many inconsistencies across both of the drawings for us to approve anything. So, with that, I think we'll end the meeting on a motion to adjourn the meeting. No one?
Motion to adjourn. Yeah.
Ms. Clark, I think that was the second. So, I don't think we need a voice vote on that, do we? Okay, well, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. With that, meeting's adjourned. See you on
And
next.
I hope
Good
you enjoy
night.
the rest of your evening.
Yes.